I am recording. I think I'm recording the wrong screen. Let's see, do I have the other screen? I do. There we go. So I am now recording the correct screen. So just kind of going to go through these quickly, look at them, and give you some very quick feedback. Brad, we'll start with you. Wait, this is Bradley, right? Yeah. Kaiser. Let's see it with the reference. All right. So could I ask, is this the camera you're going for? It is. Um, Feels a little far away to me. Um, is the idea that he sort of just jumps in from the. Uh, oh, I get you. Gotcha. Um, hmm. So I like it as an idea. I think I would, if it were me, I'm just looking at sort of overall composition that throughout most of it, all of this area here, and then like this and this area really isn't being used very much. Can you see my drawing on the screen? Yeah. So all of that area really isn't being used very much. So I would tighten it up as much as you could. Like if you could move this column in just a little bit more, like right here, and then maybe crop the entire shot something more like this, then maybe that would work a little bit better. Does that make sense? Um, and you probably wouldn't have him be able to jump from quite so high, right? But he would maybe jump from like right here into the shot here, and then back out to here. Um, so that's just more of a I don't know. When we get far away from something, it really stop like it. We feel like both that physical distance and that emotional distance. So even the poses that are really strong, like aren't as impactful because they're just taking up this much of the screen, right? So that would be my thing is like the closer we could get to him, probably the better in that regard. Um, but I like the gag that you're going for though, so I see where you're coming from. Um, I'm going to give you a couple of pose notes. Let me just kind of scrub through them here a little bit. So, sort of think in terms of contrast on this landing, right? Like, uh, like right now, this was like maybe a little bit of the squash pose, but really like, um, it's like when is that big impact or when is that big change going to happen, right? Like the character is falling through the air, right? And you want to get that point where he starts falling. You want to get that point, the last point where he is falling, right? And for that, I would stretch him out in some way or another, right? Maybe he's doing something like this, with his arms kind of stretched out like this, or I don't know. Like the you definitely want to get this like this elongated stretch, right? And the reason to get that stretch is so in the next frame you can get the squash, right? And that contrast between the two needs to be pretty clear to show the weight. Um, if we go a little further along here, so you get that. That's a nice squash. I think really what it is you just need that. You need to sort of push that contact point to get to show the contrast between the contact and the squash. At any point you can, like if you can break the silhouette with the limbs, it always makes it a little better. And so I know I'm talking specifically about Brad's right now, but everybody kind of takes some of these notes because these will apply to several people. So for right now, his arm is kind of all sort of hidden within his body here. And so what you could do is sort of push that elbow out and maybe have the hand break the silhouette down here at the bottom, right? And then the other thing is like maybe even push this elbow out to where it's a little more clearly that. And then you can get, by doing some of that, it'll clear up the silhouette of the legs, and you'll be able to see that you have, I think, we'll have a pretty nice little like gap of negative space in these areas, right? And so all of those things are really about kind of pushing the silhouette. It's a good pose. I think that would just help it a little bit. Very, I'm just kind of keep going through here. Kind of again here with like when he pops up, sort of take any opportunity you can to show the contrast between the stretch and the squash, right? So like if he's pushing off really hard, like, you know, angle that hip down and really get that foot like pushing off straight, and that way when it pops up later, it felt like it pushed really hard in order to, you know, pop up in the maybe in the up pose. Like this kind of reads as just the up pose right now, so maybe it's just you need another pose in between there where he's pushing off. Right? I think here is a chance to push your contrast again. Right? He's looking in this direction, and then he goes to looking in this direction. So try to sell that with the line of action. When he's looking in this direction, can you sort of lean him more, like maybe not too much, but like lean his line of action a little bit more, leaning forward this way, to where you're getting kind of this this curve in the spine, right? And then when he goes to look in the other direction here in a minute, you're just going to reverse that. Right? When he goes to here, you can push that as well to get this really like bigger lean in the spine here. I would consider pushing those two poses a little bit more, like in that regard. I have I mean, I didn't invent it, but I have a phrase I use a lot, which is push it until you break it. Like, which basically just keep, you know, this pose is working, but what if you exaggerate the essence of this pose a little bit? Does it get better or do you break it, right? And if it gets better, then that's good. If you break it, you hit Control Z, right? Let's keep going. I'm not sure what this pose is. Is this kind of like a halt pose or? Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think one of the things that's happening in your reference that I'm not seeing quite as much here is like he's not necessarily just looking around. I think you also want him to feel like he's like striking these like combat poses. You see it a lot in like comedies where it's like, you know, it's like you're preparing to fight. Oh, you know, like, and I think that's kind of what he's doing. Is like when he looks to one side, he's like, oh, am I ready to fight over here? Oh, over here, am I fighting? Oh, where am I fighting? And then he jumps out. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah, pauses, but like he's not just looking. It's like he's going on the defense to different sides, right? Like and I think that would make this gesture right there and right there make more sense, right? And it's not just like he turns to look; it's that he's like kind of popping up and like being ready, and then popping up and being ready to the other side. I don't know if you can see my camera when I do that. But I think that you're seeing that a little bit more in like your earlier poses when you hit, like right there. It's like I'm ready to fight. We're gonna fight, and then he's like, nope, maybe we're fighting to the other side, right? And I think this is where you could make it more like a defensive. Yeah, does he do that in something? Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to sell the defensiveness more, like that he's sneaking a little bit more that way. But having said all that, it's actually working really pretty good. Um, I like what you're getting here. Again, like you want to get that contrast between. That's there's some good reference you're shooting there actually. I feel like some of these actions in the middle are a little too similar, and so like mixing those poses up a little bit would be good. But really, it's this like the way you jump off here, like that's a great pose right there, and just sort of exaggerating it. Like I'm really glad you didn't face plant right there. Um, but like anything you can do to kind of exaggerate like this very like elongated line you're getting here, and then before that, before you jump, like you kind of get into this like this compressed state, right? Like this state, and so like you're really wanting to try to get a contrast between those two, and really push them. I think this is one that you could exaggerate quite a bit and get a lot out of. So cool, yeah, it's looking good, man. So I'm gonna kind of move on just in the sake of trying to get through all of them kind of quickly here. Alicia, looks like yours is nice. Oh, it opened. Ah, I see. I saw that. I was wondering what happens there. I So I bet you've set a keyframe on something by accident, and actually we're going to talk about that when I get into the lecture because I've had several people asking me questions about how to like I think that they're not selecting the character in a way that's uh, the best way to key it, and so you may accidentally be selecting some controls or some rigging that is in control of the hair. The other thing is Maya sometimes messes up a little bit, and it may be that if you close down Maya and reopen it, it might fix it. Um, Having said that, though, I think your poses are looking pretty good on this. Um, I like the I don't know. I like this character. Um, there's I I like when there's an exaggeration of certain silhouette features, and it's very clear to tell where her limbs are and where her feet are. Like I really like the small feet at the end of what is a little bit of a thicker leg. Um, and I think that it's got a really neat opportunity for silhouettes then, right? Like it's very clear to tell where her feet are. And I think her hands and torso are actually pretty good with that too. So I think once you get her kind of turned toward the camera in these next few frames, that'll work out good. But all this is looking on track to me. And I know you got to figure out the hair thing, and we can, if you need some help with that, let me know. I may be able to help you figure out what's happening on that. Um, and your reference is this you? Yeah, your reference is good. Like this is really um, one of the things I would say is it looks like it's playing in slow motion. So you'll probably have to do a retiming on it once you get your keys in there to get it something that is a little bit more accurate on timing. Um, but you got some cool opportunities here for silhouette and weight. It's not. That's why I hate Windows Media Player. Let's see if I can pause it. Um, that's not it. Right there, like the way you push off that tree, and like I think this is an area where like where you would exaggerate the reference, right? You gotta you get a nice silhouette on your legs when you're doing that, but maybe you would play around with the the elbow getting a little bit more of a gap in the elbows here, so you get this negative space on the character. Um, but I think that that's one of the reasons this is going to read well is because like the feet are very clear. I think you may end up having to change your camera angle a little bit because I do think it's working well from your camera angle because you run right at the camera at the end, right? Like I would almost consider putting the camera to where your character runs past it, right? But yeah, this is off to a good start. So, that push off the tree is going to be probably the hardest part, and the landing. Something to notice is you probably won't get this in the blocking, but this will be sort of in the polish pass or the splining pass. Notice that your feet kind of stagger the way they hit, right? It's like one foot hits, then the other foot hits, and like, but if you look closely in that as you're frame by framing it, but it's probably going to be as like one foot hits, your sort of center mass weight will then react to that, and then the other foot is almost catching you to keep you from falling. And like I really like the way your foot is kind of like your second foot is like slapping down at the end right there. It's like it's got this nice cascading effect to it. So, my 2 cents, just other little things that would be fun to try to get into the animation at this point would be like the way your hair kind of flips out like that. I know she doesn't have the same hair, but anything you can get to kind of like what that's telling us is that the hair's momentum still thinks that it's going that way, right? And I think that's a neat element to a shot like this. So, yeah, I think you're making progress on it. Just keep hammering on it. I think it seems like you're on the right track. Yep. So. They're both at the tree. I'll do my best. There. Okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Like her foot is landing a little bit more like that. Yeah. Anytime. Yeah, it's looking good. All right, Elijah. Oh, y'all probably can't hear that, can you? Let me. Here we go. What's the next line? Good. Gotcha. So you've changed the framing on this to where he's laying down now, right? Yeah. No, this is. No, I like this. This is cool. I think it plays with your idea for later on in the shot. So, what Elijah's working on is a multi-shot lip sync. I would consider, this is just my thoughts on it. I'm just not a big fan of this camera move, right? And I think it's the timing of it. Like really, if you're gonna, you always have to think about it. Like if somebody's doing that camera move as a camera operator, they're probably holding a steady cam and they're taking steps around. So that camera can only really move as fast as a person could sort of walk around it. And it really feels like now they kind of run around it and stop, right? I would consider one of two things. I would either start the shot a little earlier, like give yourself like a second before the audio starts, and just do a slow push in from this first camera angle you have. Let me see if I can pause it when it gets there. like this first shot, like just sort of a slow camera push in that, and then do a cut to this shot right before she starts to lean in. Or I would make the degree that the camera is sort of spinning around here, like it goes like all the way around. Just make that a much shorter distance, right? Maybe start it here to where it just has to go that distance, and you can stretch it out through the entire shot, like the camera is walking around a little slow. That move around does, like, if you can make it slower, it will build the suspense, right? It's kind of got that fly on a wall like feel to it, that you feel like a person who's there, and this is a place of danger, so danger is going to feel more imminent to you. But that would be my only real note on that. I think your poses are looking pretty cool. The only thing I would say, like, and this will be sort of remedied by how you adjust your camera, is like you start to cut her head off right there. So kind of be careful a little bit with that too. Maybe another reason to consider doing the cut is so you don't have to try to keep both of their faces in this narrow range, right? Like you can still stay closer to them in all the shots that way. So, yeah. This isn't bad. You had me worried that like you'd barely gotten started. You're doing good. So. I totally understand. Like you're making progress on it. Just keep hammering. Like you're keying it. Think about dynamic hand poses, especially with him. I know he'll probably be tied up, but still, like, is he like wiggling like to try to get up? Is his hands clenched? But even with her, like they're kind of straight across on both ways there, and like anything you can do to put like villains when they're talking like this will like do these really weird hand gestures as like part of their expressions. Okay, was it like the drag? Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, it's looking good. Off to a good start. Glenn. If anybody else needs audio, let me know. So which camera angle are you thinking? Or is that part of the question? Okay. I would turn it over to the class to give you feedback on that, but I have a preference, and I don't want them choosing the wrong one. So my 2 cents is I like the second one better. Yeah, so like a couple of reasons. I think there's a reason to, well, there's something cool happening on the second one, or on the first one, which is it feels more, I'm a little more nervous in it, right? I think the character seems smaller. He never quite gets close enough to the camera in that. But this one's more intimidating because you can see down, right? And so like I wish we could preserve some of that a little bit. And that like being able to see like how big of a fall that is. Dynamically, I like the end of. I like that you can see the roll better, and I like the angle and the poses a little bit better in the original one.
It's just about you games.
Okay. But like I didn't even notice the little roll on the smaller piece the first time I watched it. It was only the second time I watched it, and I think that your pose looks. Let me see. Like that pose right there doesn't feel very strong in this one, but it feels really in the next one, but it feels really strong in this shot here. Like that right there. Like I like what you're getting here with the line of sight and stuff. So it makes me wonder if there's a way that you could still do some of this, like Go back here. Let's see. So you start the character way back here. Like, I wonder if you could still get some of that tension just by, like, maybe, I don't know. Like, I was going to say, like, being able to see the drop here, right? That this is like a big building here, and you can see it from this. I don't know. There's something there that I would, what you get in that dynamic angle that the character both like he's getting closer to us when he comes this way, and then closer to us when he comes this way. That's why, and the silhouettes are sort of, they're obviously staged to this camera. What you're gaining in that you're losing in that nervousness of that jump, right? That's a very like it's not as nerve-wracking to make this jump now, partially because there's no risk that the character would fall, right? Or not as much risk that the character would fall. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of tricks you could play in this one to make it scarier. I definitely like blocking it out, but I think really what's happening is like the way it's framed. They're like, this is so close to the bottom of the frame, it doesn't feel like if he fell, it's scary, right? And you can't really see underneath here very much. So you may be able to, like, it is also like if this were a little longer, I think you could do it with a couple of cuts, right? Like you could do like after he lands, then you cut to a higher shot. You may also be able to just take this camera here and push it up and angle it down a little bit more. Like there's no perfect answer. Like that's going to change some of the other things that are working really good on it. But then you would be able to see downward below. Like you'd be able to see the potential drop that happens from that jump if he misses. Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, like a ledge, like a Mm-hmm. Yeah, like kind of like that, and then like you'd see like the something here like that. Yeah, I could totally see that might help. I think the other thing is some context would help. Just a like in my head, this is like a steel girder or steel beam or something. Hanging hanging from a chain here, like above a building. Maybe even like you could play around a little bit later on with motion, like that. Maybe this is actually just being like moved across, like this way, and he lands on it just in time for it to, yeah. And then making sure that this kind of feels like the top of a building, and maybe you can even see some other buildings back here in the background. Like I think stuff like that you could also do to increase the tension of it. Um, oh, well, that works too. I guess. Well, whatever works for you. I think in terms of like the 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 body mechanics of it, I think. I mean, yeah, that could totally work as well. And just getting like a that like cliff falling down element to it, and you can tell that this is like got some cracks in the wood or whatever. Like all of that stuff will help add to that. It's a little bit of modeling, so I don't think that that's something I would worry about for this class, but for future classes, that'll. Right. I think really the ideal for that is like you've blocked it out, and then unless you just love modeling, like go find some models you can download. Like there's some stuff that's released on Creative Commons, or you can buy like some resource packs relatively cheap. So that might be a thing to consider doing. Yeah, it's looking cool. You got some good poses in there. I know I didn't delve too deeply into the animation on that one. So, Emily, is this the right one? Looks like you have a couple of them in here. But yeah, this is the MP4. Yeah. So I think you're kind of in the same boat as a few people. You've got the first few pieces blocked out. I think big thing to recognize, and I don't know how much of this is in your video reference, is like right now her, because you're kind of cutting it off right here. Right now her spine and head just feel kind of stiff. And when... Do I have VLC on here? Let me try to open this up on VLC. Open with VLC, because I can at least scrub them. There we go. So right now when she, like you can tell in your video reference, like, I don't know if this is you or if this is a friend or what, but you're leaning, let me clear all those other drawings out. You're leaning in, right? Yeah, something got sprung on me over the weekend. I didn't have a lot of time. Also, I could not get my reference to play at the correct speed. Yeah, we can sit down and try to figure out that speed thing. Make sure you're exporting it out at 20 frames, but otherwise, like, I'm not for sure. So right now, like, you're kind of leaning forward here in this reference, and I think you would, you kind of put a curve in your character's spine. And then you'll notice as you move forward in time, you do the opposite. Like you kind of lean back, kind of arc back. Part of that is probably so you can get your hip further forward that way to do that. Like it's kind of moving your hip this way. So you can get your leg out there. And then even in this next few steps here, like you kind of throw your weight over that front foot right here. To get your weight this way a little bit more. And if you're watching your character right now, like you're getting the foot placement and stuff like that, but the rest of the body isn't really reacting to any of that. And so think of this as the entire pose. Again, I know you said you had some stuff that came up this weekend, but thinking of this as the entire body is working as a pose, not as just the feet moving or just the hips moving or anything like that. And so just blocking it out in that pose to pose way will help you sort of think about what's going on think about what's going on in each individual pose first with the body, not about the motion as much yet, right? Because after you get all of that in there, then the motion will kind of just happen naturally and you can refine the motion. So, all right. So Cesar, wait, does it matter which one? MP4? Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, so this is kind of a little bit of what I was just saying about Annalise, that it's... it mainly feels like the animation is just on the feet and the root control, and not necessarily thinking about the entire character's pose, and like the way especially with a character this size, like he's gonna have to lean in a lot. He's gonna have to like shift his weight. Thinking in terms of like power. Richard Williams calls them, or not Richard Williams. Ed Hooks calls them, I think, power centers. Right, you got like these masses, the pelvis, and then this upper chest head mass, right? And like for some of that, maybe he would lean his head in first and keep his pelvis back longer, or maybe he would move forward with his pelvis first and drag his upper body later, and like all that's still kind of not getting layered into the way he would move, right? So I think that's definitely something to take from video reference. It's hard with a character that's big and bulky like this, unless you have some armor yourself. You can work around it. Like if you have just something that you can put on your shoulders that kind of remind you that weight is there, and then try to walk in a way as if that weight were leading you or impacting you. Like, my thinking is to make him feel more aggressive. I would kind of have him lead with his shoulders just a little bit, like he's kind of like, and I mean, I think you could probably pull some of that from other bulky characters or other characters that are heavy. Like, look at like the first thing that kind of came to my mind was Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator, because there's so many scenes with him walking through the woods with like a big heavy gun or something like that, or maybe even like Rambo or something like that. Like some big muscular character carrying something through the woods. Like, they're going to also have that like Space Marine bravado that I think you're probably going for there too. So, but yeah, the biggest thing is just thinking about it as an entire character pose, not just the feet and the hips. It's like, how would that entire character sort of move through that scene? Yeah. All right, Sandra. So you're getting that thing that happens. So, yeah. So, are you working? Did you work on this or play blast this from home or from ETSU or? Okay, so it's weird. So you remember when we were talking about that? I don't remember if it was in this class or not. So I'll show you really quick in Maya. It's how Maya is evaluating the rig. So if you go to Windows and Settings and Preferences, and then Preferences, try going into Animation and setting this to DG instead of Parallel, and see if that fixes it. It may or it may not. There are other things it could be, but really what's happening, because my guess is like if you're scrubbing your timeline, you see this happen periodically, and then you go back to that frame and it's not there anymore. Is that what's yeah? So that's basically just like, it's kind of like your graphics card is making a mistake when it's rendering it in your viewport. And so that'll at least fix that. It may slow down or it may change the way it plays back in your viewport. Like, sometimes it'll make it a little slower on playback. And if so, like, really, what I would do is if it's messing that up, like, periodically just play blast the animation so you can watch it and make sure if it's playing back too slow or playing back kind of jumpy, if you just play blast it, you can sort of see it a little more clearly. Having said that, I think this is looking pretty good. So just kind of in terms of like the logistics of it, I would oh crap, let me open this in VLC. Yeah, there we go. So it happens. That's so interesting. So just the logistics of the step. The character. Sorry, where's my annotate? I would have the box end like right there, right? Because otherwise, like, it would be like that's exerting more energy than is needed, right? What would really happen is the character would take a sort of a little shuffle step to the edge here and then do that step across. But since they're stepping from that far back, I would just make that box smaller, like he doesn't have a choice, right? Does that make sense? Yeah, it's like it's just that it's an unnecessarily big step for to accomplish it. He would just take a smaller step to it. So I think you can push this a little bit. Just because I think, like, when I watch it, I'm like, yes, this feels physically accurate in a lot of ways. Like, I think the timing needs you need to play with the timing a little bit, but I think it's that it feels accurate. It just could be more appealing to watch, right? And so some of it's like even your first pose here, like that's just not you could probably push that pose and make it more dynamic and more interesting to look at, right? You could also consider since you're still, I think, kind of early on the posing side of here, like straight lines are less interesting than diagonal lines, right? And so right now it's like, the toes are pretty straight, like all of that, like the horizon is straight. If you sort of tumbled your character around a little bit to where like maybe the camera is over, let's see if I can draw a perspective camera here, over here, filming in this direction, right? Then the character would be getting closer to your camera, and this box would then be a diagonal line instead of a horizontal line, right? And so I think just sort of this like side angle of stuff isn't always as interesting to look at, and it doesn't give you as much options with your silhouettes or with your poses, because this shoulder is here, and then the other shoulder is like right behind it, so I can't really see the contrapposto as much, right? And so that would be my first thought, and then I think the other thing would just be making sure you're pushing the silhouettes. Like even if you stay with this pose, like could you rotate the character's chest a little bit toward us, and that way we could see like a little bit of a contrapposto line there. Maybe move a foot back so we get like the other the foot something like this, and then maybe like I'm just kind of eyeballing it here. And then a little bit of a curved spine back, like it's contemplating it. Got maybe like an elbow out here. I don't know. I'm just kind of like messing with it, like just something that mixes up the pose a little bit more. Probably need a little bit more of a bent knee here, or something. Just so it's like a little like right now, like your line of action is a little too straight, and I think it's really just that loosens up once you start moving your character forward. Like this feels better because you get you're getting a little bit of bend in the spine, and I think you really are like trying to push it a little bit here as well. But I think anything you can do to kind of keep pushing these poses to make them really dynamic is going to help it. So like even in this pose, like what you could do is I always think of like what's the direction of the action, and the direction of the action is like kind of like this, right? So I try to make my line of action as much of that as possible, right? So maybe what you would do then is your character's pose would maybe be a little bit more like sort of reaching with this foot like this, get the toe out there, the head way back here. And then the arms kind of doing a little bit of something like this, right? I don't like he's kind of throwing himself back that way, and so then the line of action does feel like it's kind of flowing through the body and going this direction. So, so I think what you have here feels like, again, it feels physically accurate in most ways. It's more like I would push it for sort of style and appeal a little bit more. And I always think of it as like turning up the volume on it, right? Like it's clear right now, but if you exaggerate it, it gets even more clear. It gets more like true to the essence of the action that's happening, right? And so like this pose right right here, the essence of what is happening here is reach, right? It's this character is reaching for that box or stretching for that box. And so taking that idea, how do you increase the essence of reach, right? Like to make reach feel more like what's happening. And just crank it up. So the level you crank it up really kind of changes style a little bit, like, and recognize that if what you were going for was like realism here, this feels more accurate. Like it's like closer to realistic in terms of exaggeration. But I think you can, at that point, it's not got, it doesn't show as much of the character, and so I think anything you can do to raise that would be helpful. The other little thing I would say, consider your framing of the shot. like maybe frame it something like this instead, and that way you can get rid of all of this stuff here that really isn't carrying as much information. So seems like a cool opportunity too to raise the stakes a little bit as well. Like, you know, it's stepping from one box to the other, but if these, you know, like kind of like Glenn's, like if this were on a you know, a giant drop off here, right? And we had, like, you know, it goes down forever here, and this is just sort of this precarious little thing that's hanging here they have to step over onto. That might also, like, add some tension to it. So yeah, cool. It's looking good. All right, Smith. Okay. Yeah, I was trying to get the camera up here at the same time. Okay. Yeah. I like where you're going with this. Kind of again like what I was telling Sandra, like this side angle isn't always the most the most flattering for your poses. So maybe consider, like, if you wanted to do a little bit more in depth on it. It reads as kind of like a video game in this way. Like, I think that's what we're used to seeing from this profile angle the most. Which isn't bad, but even with video game characters, if you'll notice, they usually aren't I don't know if you can see my camera. They're usually not a perfect, like, profile, right? What they usually are is, like, they favor the camera just a little bit, so we can see the character like a 3/4 view. And so that would be something that I would say, like, I really like the way you have her kind of lean in on this first, like right there. I like some of those poses. I feel like the feet are feeling a little flat to me, like when she raises them up here. So that's feeling good, but then, like, when the foot raises up here, like, you can still kind of see that it's like it's flat to the floor. And so sort of think about how, like, your foot would sort of peel up off the floor as you're raising it. And I think also, like, once you get your camera in a slightly different angle, it's going to feel like the character's toes are pointing straight forward, right? Like, if you were looking at this from above, both of her feet are pointing, like, perfectly, like, forward, right? And so usually we stand with our feet just a little bit angled. Like, maybe her feet would be something more like that, right? Yeah, but otherwise I think this is looking pretty good. I would play around with those different camera angles and see if it messes anything up in terms of your poses, but I can see where you've pulled from the poses, though. Like, it's something I've read from Capcom and their fighting games that they call the 5-degree rule, where even if it doesn't make sense, it looks better to have the character rotated to the camera by 5 degrees. Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know about that. So, yeah, like, I think this pose right here to me really reads as something you probably pulled from reference, and you can kind of tell, or maybe not necessarily just the pose, but like the way she kind of, like, leans in and then does that. Like, all of that's reading as, like, from the reference. And that pose kind of is reading from the reference too. So, yeah, good work, man. All right, and who is this one? Okay. Is oh, cool. So this is the. It took me a second to figure out which one this was. This is the looking around uh, version of this, right? Like trying to find or like yeah. Yeah, I like this. This is looking cool. Um, so I think it's almost, this is interesting. It's almost reading more like a pantomime acting piece, but that's okay. Like I mean, you've gotten a little extra acting in your in your body mechanics piece here. I think one of the things I would kind of play around with is just you got these little foot shuffles that happen in the beginning here, right? Primarily this. Let me open it up in another viewer so we can see it. Open with VLC. I should just associate them with VLC. What's happening? There we go. So you have this little foot shuffle right there, right? And then, but really up until this step right here, right, your other foot doesn't move at all, right? It still stays like kind of stuck to the floor there. And I would do like another little shuffle or two. Like I can't tell from your reference if you're doing that as much, but it does kind of feel like that. Like even if it doesn't, you don't pick it up and move it, you may at least sort of roll up on your toe and twist it or something like that, right? And I would just find a little spot. Right, right. And I would find that to do that because even to be able to do that, you would have to shift your character's weight just a little bit to like redistribute the weight. Um, and I think just doing a little bit of that would really sell this as a body mechanics piece. Um, I'm I'm curious about the framing of this when it's all done. I feel like you would probably try to get the like you're going to want to. I'm sure you want to show the feet, but maybe doing it either something like this or maybe something like this. And what you would get then is the ability. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think definitely try to pin down your camera as much as you can because that will change your pose once you move the camera, like we were talking about with Glenn's. But one of the reasons I kind of like this, or maybe even like a little bit more like this, is because I'm assuming like you got these bookshelves over here, right? You could still have the same thing happening here with these bookshelves. Well, that's not how they're going to work. That's not how perspective works, Greg. Like you're going to have these bookshelves that are all kind of like leading your eye. And then you could have them all kind of leading your eye to whatever it is the character actually finds up here, right? And that's kind of just like that's a little bit of a compositional trick that you can use that to help us find it before they find it, or to help us not be surprised when they go for it, right? So yeah, I think this is working good. Little things you could play around with, like you know, right now the elbows are all kind of bunching up here. It would be nice if at some point we could see like the elbow kind of break the silhouette a little bit. That way you could see that gap in between. That's just in this one pose, so it's not really that big of a deal. But finding little spots like that to where you like right there when they turn, and then this pose here, like these both feel really good to me. And I think a lot of the poses, like what's helpful about it is like you are able to read the emotion in the poses, and that's just hard to do. So the fact that you're already getting that is great. Any that you can push it as well would still be nice. Like if you can get, like right now the back is a little stiff here, just to curl it in just a little bit more, get the character's head out there just a little bit more, and like this arm really reaching. That's just going to read as a little more inquisitive, and it's going to give you somewhere to go when your character shifts back to this pose right here, right? So if earlier your line of action was this, right, now you're going to shift back to what appears to be sort of like this line of action, right? You're kind of like kind of making this S curve. So you just get some contrast in there with the way they change, or with the way that line of action changes. So yeah, cool, nice work. Okay, did I skip anybody? Did anybody hop in there a little later? See Jeremy. I know Jeremy had sent me a message and said he didn't have a ton of progress on it. I don't know. Were you wanting me to check it out? Okay. No, you're coming along. You got a couple of good poses here though. Like this is a good pose. Again, I think, like we mentioned with several other people, make sure you're kind of thinking of the final composition of your shot. Like, is it this? And that will affect stuff because it's stuff like in this pose, it would tell you whether you would want to get your knee out there a little further so you get that little like gap of space there that you can see. Yeah, I think you're off to a good start on here. I know you had some technical issues with the rig, so I think just keep working with it. And it's reading from that one pose once he gets up there. Is he going to do like a balance? Like he's like going to be like walking, like keeping his balance across it? Is that sort of the idea? Anyway, that's just what it kind of reminds me. Balance and spin and jump off to right. Okay, cool. Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, I think just getting your camera set up is a big portion of that. That'll help you sort of get the rest of that in a little easier. So, all right. Okay, I don't know if that was. Hopefully, that was helpful. Gave you all some places to go. I'm very happy with this overall. I think that you all have a. You still have a little ways to go on this, but I kind of expected that. I kind of expected that we. I feel like we. If I were to look back, I would have. I would have done this a little. Whoa, my camera is really dark. I would have done this a little differently, in that I would have maybe tried to get you to get your video reference a little earlier. That way, we could have started blocking like a little earlier. But having said this, like these are looking good, and like I think you're on track to be in a good spot over the next few days. So. Just keep blocking. What I would like to talk about for the rest of class is the breakdown process. Does anybody need a quick break before we do that? I know because it probably will end up taking up a reasonable portion of the rest of the class. Yeah, let's take like a little like 10-minute break. I'll jump back in at I'll still be here, but we'll jump back in at about 12:45. And hopefully I'll have everything up and ready to go by then. So, and I mean, you don't have to leave. You're welcome to just hang out. Yep. There's not. I will. Let's talk about that when we jump back in. That way, anybody who stepped away can hear the answer as well. So remind me, and I'll jump on that. So. Sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I, yeah, cool. You want to share your screen? Or do we want to wait until, I don't know how many people have like walked away from the computer, if this is something that's beneficial for them. Wait, yeah, let's check it out real quick. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the thing that, is this the camera you're looking at? Oh, yeah. So I think the thing that so think of a couple of things here. Your uh, like I'm gonna draw here just for a second. So yeah. Well, I can just draw it here in this space. So like you have these three masses, right? You got your head, your chest, your pelvis, right? And really what makes this line of action happen is the angle that these are all turned in, right? So like it's not that they're all just this like perfect like straight on angle all the time, right? They can rotate in all three axes. So to get that line of act, or to get the contrapposto and the line of action in the torso, you get your chest mass here, right? And then you get your pelvis, and then like you have to kind of figure out what angle you want them to be at, right? Like is your hip, um, like to sort of think of the forward facing part of both of them. Is it like this, right? To where like she's kind of rolled her hips forward a little bit, and like her pelvis is sort of pointing up, and then her chest is kind of rotating downward like this. And if it was, yeah, and if it were that, then you would get this like this sort of mass in the middle to get that line of action, right? I wish I could undo that last stroke. Can I? I cannot. Apparently I can. So that's also like the sort of the thing you have to think of is like these can twist, right? You could also have torso here, a torso here. Those are both terrible. Torso here, pelvis here, where your pelvis is sort of facing away, right? And your upper chest is twisting this way. And that means your shoulders are here, right? And your hips are more like here, right? And you get these twisting, like this twisting motion in your contrapposto. Does that make sense? Right. And that's like if you were thinking of this as a plane, it's like that kind of plane. And I think that's kind of what I would go for if you sort of turned her a little bit more on her, a little bit more of a profile, right? Yeah. Push this shoulder back a little bit, push this shoulder forward more. And what you would get is this line of action that goes through her arms like this, that cuts through her chest, right? And then it would feel like you could lower this shoulder more, raise this shoulder more, and you would be able to get that like that lean in twist to the body now. Does that make sense? I don't know. It's not. It doesn't always have to be like just those two axes. Like you can twist it around and however you need to counter them to make it a more dynamic angle. But I really think like this looks pretty good. My thought would be that I would pull that shoulder back a little bit. Actually, for different reasons, I would do that because, well, I mean, like you do it by like rotating the chest control. Yeah, just sort of like pull her back like that way a little bit more, and then maybe rotate this arm out a little bit more so it's breaking the silhouette out here a little bit more. And just by doing some of that, what you're getting is she's a little bit more ready now to swing that sword, right? Like if you think you may be attacked at any moment, you would keep that that arm back ready to attack at any time, right? Check your, I've seen people do it in different ways too. Like I think this works, but what you're going to get is when she attacks, you're going to get that reversal, right? If she swings, this foot is going to be behind, and then this arm is going to be swinging forward. Her arm here will go that way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's looking cool. Anytime. So I have to remember how to do this here. Give people another few more minutes to get in. Yep. Yeah, I'd posted back. I don't know if you. That's right. Let's see here. Uh-oh. So, actually, I think we're pretty close to being able to. No, that's what I was going to say. Let's go ahead and pull it up now and see if I can, because other people are kind of having some issues too. Can you share your screen really quick? Let's see if we can figure out if we can. So where's the plane that has the material on it? Is that screen? Yeah, hit Shift H to bring it back. Okay. Now press 6. Let's see if the texture's on it. There it is. That's texture mode. So when was it 4 is wireframe, 5 is shaded, 6 is textured. So we've applied it. That's actually it's usually one of two things. It's the texture mode thing, or it is that if the frame numbers on your sequence aren't lining up with the frame numbers in your timeline. So like if it were like video clip 02, right? And then you get that 001 at the end of that, then what it's doing is it's putting your image sequence on frame 2001 instead of on frame 1, right? But yeah, that was I know it's always that simple thing like it's like, oh yeah, for it's all right. I saw the message on Monday, and I don't have notifications turned on my Discord because I'm in so yeah, I'm in so many Discords that I'm like, oh, I would never like see them all. So, all right, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and steal the screen back from you. That's all right. You are welcome. Okay, so Elijah, you had a question before we jumped into it. What was that one more time? Gotcha. Um, no, there's not a reason. They both have good uses. Um, I'm usually um, so for those of you who haven't used the camera and aim before, I'll show you really quick how that works. Once Maya decides to open. Um, so the what he's talking about is that when we go to create, come on, it's loading all my plugins, and I'll show you all some of that here in a minute. But okay, there they go. Maybe. So I have a whole bunch of these extra plugin scripts. Don't sweat those too much. They're actually really nice, but they're also like it's another expense that you all may not want. But I'm going to show you some stuff here in a minute that takes the place of some of them. Where are you at? Is my computer even working? Okay, it is. So if we go to create and then cameras, you get a couple of different options here. You get a camera, which is just that, and then you get a camera and an aim. Right? So camera and an aim look a little different in that it is a group over here, and in that group is a camera and a locator that the camera is aimed at. Right? So you could move that entire group around wherever you need to get started, right? But your aim is this thing that you can move to aim your camera. Right? And you'll notice that it always tries its best to stay looking up. For me, the reason I usually use an aim is if I'm tracking something. So layer 2 panes side by side, right? If I just went to camera 1, right? I'm going to go ahead and leave this one in perspective so you can see it. If I move my camera around, you can see what it does over here. It sort of changes, and I can manually aim at it. I guess it's almost out of like laziness is why I usually use this. It's like it's just more what I'm used to. But it doesn't mean you have to. Like really where an aim is handy is that you can track things with it. So let's say if this object is moving from side to side really fast, like from here to over here in like 20 frames, right? To track that with this camera, I would have to kind of tumble around here, get here on it, select it, hit S, and then on frame 20, I would try to find it again, frame it, hit S again, right? And then like, there's no guarantee that it's doing exactly what I want through the middle here, so I may still want to change it up again. And so that's a little bit more hard to track an object. Plus you'll notice to do that, I kind of had to move the location of the camera too. So the other thing I could have done on all of that with the camera is I could have just rotated it 20 degrees. So you hit E to rotate. And then I would want to rotate in world space, so I could just sort of rotate across here to catch it. All right. And then hopefully that's working pretty good. But again, like right here through the middle, it starts to fall behind. Maybe I'd want to do like that. Right. And so all that works. The reason to use an aim, so if I go to my other camera, this is the camera with the aim, right, is that I can move both the camera and it will stay aimed at the locator, or I can move the locator and the camera will aim at it, right? And so it's a handy tool to, if we're starting here, I can put this aim over here on the object. And I could literally constrain that if I wanted to. Right? I could do that and do this rigging, constrain, parent constraint. And so now, no matter what happens, my aim is always going to be aimed at that object, right? I don't know why it's rendering it like that, because that's inaccurate, but you get the idea. Like, we're always aiming at that. No matter what this object does, we'll always be able to track it. It works good. Like, there's reasons to use it. I used it a little bit in the 3D animation class for some stuff. One of the things I don't like about it is that it's too perfect, and most camera operators are not, right? Have you ever been watching, like, if you're watching like a football game, and so you're watching a football game, and the quarterback goes to throw, but then he like fakes it, and you'll see the camera like start to follow it and then come back when they realize he didn't fake it, right? Or he does a really good job at like faking the handoff, and the cameraman is following the wrong person. If you watch really closely, you see that in movies too, right? You'll see like a character running, and then they jump, or like something happens to them, and the camera operator knows it's going to happen. They try to catch it in time. They try to catch that change, but they'll maybe be like a frame behind, right? Like if the character jumps, the character may start to jump like a frame before they expect them to, and then they have to kind of catch up to watch them do it. And so, like, this is going to be absolutely perfect. Like, it's machine tracking it. And that's really handy for a lot of stuff. But it really only feels like I use it only in certain sort of situations. But you use it how you want to. Like, if it makes more sense to you, go for it. I almost never use the camera, aim, and up, because that's usually meaning you want to have another control that controls the angle of your camera. What is that? Is it pitch? No, it's pitch, yaw. I can never keep them straight. You want one that will control like you being able to lean your camera to the side, right? And that you just do that so infrequently that it's not like, maybe that's something you would want if you were doing like some sort of aerial shots or something like that, flying. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good way of working. I think that if that works for you, absolutely run with it. I feel like most shots you could use either one depending on what you like, and I think it's really just a preference thing for most people. So, no, other than like if you do some weird angles, sometimes the camera does, like, it's trying to maintain pointing up, and so like if you point it down at the floor, once it gets down to the floor, it's gonna flip that up and like then go back the other way, and so you're gonna get this weird like flip right through the middle of it. So little things like that, but no, like you can. They both have their problems. I'll put it that way. So, all right. So I'm going to try to, I don't know that I need to share computer sound. So I'm going to go ahead and share some stuff here. We'll start talking about breakdowns. Now, before we do, there's a couple things you're going to need. So this is just a file that I have more for illustration purposes than anything. Again, I want to remind people, because I've been getting this from a couple of people, about how to select your character rig. Right. So if I were to turn on my NURBS curves, recognize that if I select this, it looks like I've selected everything, right? Like everything highlighted on all my controls. But I didn't. The only thing I have selected is that base control. And this is just a Maya thing, that if something is a child of another, if one object is a child of another object, when you select it, it looks like you've selected both it and the child, right? So if I select this shoulder, the way this is rigged, the clavicle and or the elbows and stuff are not actually children of that, right? And so it's a little easier to tell with that. But if you select this main controller, it looks like, wow, I just selected everything. Everything's great. I didn't though. There's no keyframes on this, even though we have animation all over it, right? The only thing that I've really selected is that controller. And so remember, like, I've had some people who have had issues, like they've been setting keyframes and they thought they were setting a keyframe on everything and they weren't. If it's some rigs, like, it's a pain in the butt that the only real way you can make that happen is to go through here and literally select everything. Like, you have to one at a time select everything. There's some tricks to how you could do that. You can turn everything off, only turn on NURBS curves, and then drag select this. And that probably selected most of it. It probably didn't select the IK arms, so you'd have to add those later. But a lot of places, or a lot of rigs, add in these little sets down here that you're able to select with. So right now, Boney has this selection set here, and you can see that I can use that to select all the controls. Those are the things that the keyframes are going on. Also, I think some people, and I don't know where this is coming from, some people are just selecting the entire rig group and setting keyframes on that, or even worse, selecting everything in the rig here and setting keyframes on that. There are some of these things that the rig will break if you do that. So just be careful when you're setting keyframes that you are selecting just the controllers for the character, right? And if you need help figuring out which ones are, or how to do that, just send me some screenshots of your channel box, and I can help you figure that part out. So today I wanted to talk about breakdowns. I'm going to go ahead and hide my grid. It's nice and all, but not necessary. So I have this Boney character here. I know you all are still sort of finishing out your blocking in a lot of cases. Some of you are getting pretty close. Some of you still have a little ways to go. But I want to talk about like what happens in the next step of this, right? Once you're done with all of your blocking, where do you go next, right? So different terms for this. Some places call it blocking plus. Some people call it breakdown pass. I kind of use them interchangeably. And we have our two key poses here. So what I've done is I've gone through and I've set two pretty distinctively different poses on this character. There's the looking. I guess this will be screen left, and then and then looking screen right. All right, so we just got these two poses, and let's just pretend these are our key poses, right? For part of our animation. So our breakdown is figuring out what happens in between those two poses, right? Frame 10, frame 20, that is a good 8 frames for Maya to screw up for you, right? And when we let Maya make those decisions, it always makes a very predictable decision, right? It does for the most part, a linear blend between those two. There's a little bit of an ease in and ease out at the end of each of that. But, if we were looking at those two poses, what Maya is going to give us directly in the middle, like if we just scrubbed halfway between that, which I think I currently have mine set to stepped mode, but if we just scrubbed halfway between those two, right, Maya is just going to give us this, right, which is not a very flattering pose. So again, from this pose, Maya's solution for halfway between, the breakdown for that is this, which just isn't very pretty, right, to get to this. And so you can kind of see it. It's like, it's almost mechanical in the way we get back and forth between those two, right? So what a breakdown is us making a better decision for Maya in the way that transition happens, right? The way I like to remind myself about this is Maya's the in-betweener, right? But Maya will never make a creative decision. Maya's not a person, like real in-betweeners used logic. They used their understanding of appeal to make a better breakdown pose than this. So we have to kind of guide Maya to making the right breakdown pose. And we can do that just by changing what happens in that pose in between, right? So this is an easy way. Like when I looked at our boring one that Maya gave us, it's just blending straight across, right? Like the head isn't really dipping very much. Nothing is dipping very much. We could make this more interesting just by adding a little bit of an arc to that motion, right? That the character dips his head a little bit before going into this pose, right? And that's going to change that motion, right? So we are in control of defining how our characters get from pose A to pose B, and that's very important when conveying who a character is, right? I always use the example of a character raising their hand, right? You've been in classes, for the last 18, 20 years. I don't know how long y'all have been in classes. And the teacher asks a question, there's different ways that you might raise your hand, right? If you are really excited about the subject and you want to have your input, you maybe urgently get your hand up there, right? Yeah, me, right? Versus the teacher wants everybody to answer one question and you think you know the answer, but you're really shy. And maybe then your hand just kind of creeps up a little bit in the way it goes up. And it's the difference in leading with your elbow as your hand goes up or leading with your hand as your hand goes up. I don't know can you all see my camera when I'm doing that? Okay. So it's just I can never know what Zoom has done, right? So it's just the difference in those two different ways that you might do that. And that's going to tell us something different about that character, right? This character is a little more energetic, right? This character probably isn't elderly, they're young or they're almost wasting energy in the way they're turning, right? Out of excitement or something, right? It also gives us a little bit of that feeling of a take, what, right? I always think of this. You're at a party talking to one person to your left or to the left of the screen, and somebody walks in on the other side and you hear their voice, right? And it's a person you haven't seen in years and you're like, what? Right? You get this this more surprise as you shift across. So let's try another breakdown. The reason that this is important is because this is a creative decision you're making as the animator. How do I get from pose A to pose B, right? We could go up, right? This is a little bit a different arc, but this is still the same to pose A and pose B. It's just how we decide to go from pose A to pose B, right? And this is a little bit more maybe something like that shot that Brad had a minute ago, where the character's kind of hopping around and eager or at the ready, right? That maybe this is a little bit more of a hop from pose A to pose B, right? Hop. We could try something different, right? So this isn't that much different than what Maya gave us. Remember when we were kind of drifting across here in the Maya version, right? It just kind of goes across. But this Maya's version of the drifting across halfway through, right, on frame 45 instead of 5 frames in, is just 50% of each pose, right? Instead, let's think of this as what if we favored pose A, right? What if halfway through this transition, we are still more in pose A than we are in pose B, right? Well, what that's going to feel like is that we're easing out of pose A and not and sort of rushing into pose B, right? It's a way of playing with our timing and our spacing to have our breakdown pose be this we're slowly drifting away from pose A to pose B, right? Think of it as at the party again. You're talking to somebody and you're really engaged in that conversation, and somebody from the other end of the room is asking you an annoying question, and you're like, okay, yeah, we'll get back to that conversation in just a second. What do you want, right? Your drift, your attention is still in pose A, as you're leaving it and moving toward pose B, right? We could do the other, like we could sort of, or well, maybe not the other. We could do like another way of sort of looking at that and combining like not all of our body parts sort of leaving at the same time, right? Like our breakdown may be that our head and torso is kind of already doing a breakdown, moving over there, but our hands are for the most part dragging behind, right? And what this is going to allow us to do is add some more overlapping action into this, right? In the same way that wait, who was it? Was it Alicia? Was it your piece that we were talking about your hair overshooting, right? It was dragging behind in your reference, right? We could do the same thing with our character's hands. We could have, the head is kind of leading this action, but the hands kind of drag behind as they go across, right? And we're getting that arc in there. So keep in mind when we say breakdown, we're still using that same concept that we were with blocking, right? Blocking, we're starting off with a blank slate, right? And we're starting to chop down to the essence of the animation, right? So if you're sculpting a character's head or something like that, you're turning this box into roughly a spherical shape, right? What we're doing now is we're refining that, right? We're just adding more information to the way this transition happens in the form of a keyframe, right? To allow us to define that motion better. So in all of these other examples I've had so far, we only used one breakdown in between those two poses, but we could do more than one, right? Like we could do pose A and then sort of leading with the lower body, right? And then sort of dragging the hands behind and then going to this pose. Right? So if we watch that now, clicking through it, we get something like that. Right? And is this playing back reasonable enough speed when I do this? So if y'all are missing frames or anything, I can change the way. I think right now I'm sharing it not optimized for video. Yeah, let's just leave it like that. But if it's skipping on y'all, let me know and I'll click through them a little slower here. So I broke it down twice, right? I have my sort of drifting away, my ease out of this pose, and then I have sort of this like super dip here where he's going low in order to get this head arc and then pushing back up, right? And when we dip down, I'm dragging the arms behind. So all of this is just defining the way this head turn or this turn would happen in a more detailed way. I'm adding more information to make that motion clearer. We can do some what we call lead and follow, right? Which is my breakdown could just be one part of the body starting to turn. Right? So my character leading with their head, right? And then their head pulling them across while their hands and maybe the lower part of the body is sort of dragging behind a little bit to get to this pose, right? Now watch what happens when we look at that, when we click through that. It makes the character's turn feel more urgent, right? It's like their brain is pulling them across, right? I think of it as they're at that party talking to somebody and it's a relatively engaging conversation, but suddenly they hear, a long lost love, enter the door and say their name, and they're like, "What?" Right? So that is what this lead and follow is important. Like, what is leading this action? Whereas earlier, if the character's body was leading it, but the head was dragging behind, that implies that the brain is still engaged in the original conversation. And the body just realizes, we got to turn, we got to answer their question. Okay, what do you want, right? Like it's kind of, this is the opposite. This is the head practically pulls the body across, right? So like we can play around with like some very dynamic motions. Like we had earlier, sort of this like, sort of pushing your character up, but realize your breakdown can be an overshoot, right? So if we look at this, like the character goes up, but then sort of squishes, like goes past the end pose and then comes back, right? So an overshoot is part of overlapping action and follow through, right? It's that the character is moving so quickly that they weren't able to stop on time or stop in the right spot. They go past it and come back, right? Does that make sense? So again, like we can have as many breakdowns as we want to on this one. This breakdown, I put 4 breakdowns in between the pose, right? We can sort of drag with the foot, right? Big dip, overshoot past in the horizontal direction, overshoot past in the up direction, then settle at my final pose, right? That's like 5 breakdowns just to get from pose A to pose B, right? And sort of the same here, you know, we can really make it dynamic, right? And like how these, so that's feeling a little floppier, right? So, so let's talk about how we get these breakdowns. I'm going to go ahead and show my NURBS curves here. So I'm going to, currently I don't have stepped preview turned on, or I don't have step preview turned on, but I'm still in stepped mode. So I will just open up my graph editor here really quick, and you'll see that, you know, all of my keys are in stepped mode. I just going to grab them all, set them all to auto. And so now you'll see, like, this is my transition from pose A to pose B, right? Let's zoom in here so we can just kind of focus in on that little section there. We'll do 420, not intentional, to, let's go ahead and make it 450, right? So this transition, without any tools at all, like really we just have to manually do some of this, right? Like I could, if I wanted to favor that first pose, I could steal a keyframe from right through here, right? Like I could still frame 422 and hit S, nope, hit S, and then just move that keyframe later, right? And so now we ease out of that and go into it. And then like maybe what I would want to do is like sort of change this up a little bit, right? I would want to like maybe change the pose to not just be a perfect like transition. I would add maybe something like this. Maybe lower the character's head. Maybe I would be reaching with this one arm, right? And so this is how I'm going to make my breakdown, right? Something like that. And so we get like that for my breakdown instead, right? So that's cool. Like there's a lot of things that we can do manually, but there are actually a lot of really good tools to help us with that. And that's what a lot of this stuff is that you're seeing all over my UI, like all these sliders and everything. It's actually a set of plugins called Animbot. They have a subscription model for it. Actually, let me make me a quick button here so I can remember this. Just so I can select stuff quickly. No. So now I have my button to select everything. So Animbot like has a whole bunch of tools for stuff like that. But there are other tools that are free that will still help you a little bit. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about today is how to use that tool. So well, let me show you how to get here again, just in case you missed it. If you are in D2L, table of contents, right? Resources, and this resource files from Greg. Again, there's a couple of plugins here that are pretty useful. The 3 plugins that I've put in here is Tween Machine, Studio Library. This is like a pose library, which you can download all of these for free as well. And then one called LM Spring 2. And that's I'll show you all that a little bit later. It's a way of kind of generating some overlapping action. Oh, sorry, Carissa. I'm recording though, so you can always backtrack and catch the stuff you may have missed. So the one we're going to be looking at today is Tween Machine. So select that, download it. You already see I have mine here. So I'll hit save anyway. Sure. I save everything in this like crazy temp folder that I have, right? I'm just going to, let's go ahead and, wait, where did it go? Let's go ahead and extract it. 7-zip, extract to that. There it goes. So there's two different versions of this. There's the Mel version and the Python version. Let's go ahead and do the Python version for right now. Just open this up. It's right there. Right? And I'm going to go ahead and just copy that path. Right? So what you maybe would want to do is save this somewhere permanently on your computer. Right now this is just in a temp location. And the reason for that is because it comes with an icon if you need an icon for it. But you don't have to. What I'm going to do is this Tween Machine. I'm going to open up my script editor. Right? I'm going to find that path again. Right there. I want to copy that. And go to File, Open Script. And then I'll just paste this in here. Select Tween Machine Python and hit Open. And you'll see that here's the Python script that is required for, Sadie is free. I'll introduce you all here in a few minutes. My wife's taking her for a walk. So here's the whole Python script. Really what I'll do is just hit Control A, and then I can just drag this up here to my timeline. Again, if we wanted to choose an icon for it, we can do that under this Edit menu, under Shelf here. I could go point to that icon right there. And now I get this little Tween Machine icon if you want it. You could also just write the word Tween here on your icon label. But let me show you what this does. When I hit this button, it opens up this thing here. Okay? And I'm going to go ahead and select my entire character and just sort of show you that, like, if I'm on frame 24, this slider does basically what I did earlier, right? If I want to favor my first pose, I drag it to screen left, right? And if I go all the way to 100, it will set a keyframe there for me that is 100% of frame, the previous frame, right? So 100% of pose A, right? And if I drag it to like 70%, I get a pose that is 70% of pose A. Right, so we can get that. And so I can do like some really interesting like quick change up stuff here now, right? I could go like, it's a really quick turn right in the middle, right? Let's go ahead and delete those. I'll show you some other ways this is useful. If you go to options here, there's an option for overshoot. And if I turn that overshoot on, that means right now that is pose B, right? But what I could do is go to 427 and take this out here past 100%. I could go to 115%. And it'll go past that end pose. So now what I get is this overshoot at the end, right? So it's a very quick way of helping with some stuff. Now, here's what I use it for the most, is that you don't, well, maybe not the most. I use it for stuff like this, but this is not the finished pose, right? This overshoot pose I just made is like my starting point for the finished pose, right? If I really want it to look like we've overshot that, maybe I want it to just look like my body overshot it and my arms are going to catch up later or something. And so what I can do then is I can grab just those body parts, just the arms, right? And instead of it being 115%, I can make it like 66%, right? Or I could just manually pose that in myself. Right? And so really, this is just a way of getting a quicker like starting point for your breakdown poses, right? And so now I get that. Again, take everything into consideration. Do I want like my character to dip? Do I want some squash and stretch in the spine? Maybe add a little bit of squash and stretch in the spine. Rotate that forward just a little bit. Make the head rotate, right? And so now my new overshoot pose is a little different, right? And that's where you're making the creative decisions. So again, this is why we really worry about how good our blocking poses are. It's because these blocking poses are what we will build off of to get these poses, right? And if they're good, if your blocking poses are good, then when you use the tween machine, you'll get something that's okay at first, and you just have to make it a little better. You're never going to get the perfect pose with the tween machine, though. One of the things that this is nice for is just for having, like, I use it for feet a lot, right? Like if I really want my foot to get to this end pose quickly, right? Let me select everything and delete this here. Delete. If I really want my body to drag behind, but my foot to get there quicker, maybe I'll do like a breakdown here on 426. That is like 64% of that. But the foot controls here, let's see if I can grab the foot controls. I would set those to 100. Let's see if I can do 100. I may have to turn off that overshoot to do perfect 100. There we go. And so now my foot gets all the way at that end pose in just the first 4 frames, right? And so that's a way for me to get that feeling of weight shift, right? The character shifted their weight in those first 4 frames. Right? It's there, and then over through here, I could continue to keep this foot. Again, I could keep it at 100% this side, but I could continue to keep it at 100% that side all the way out to here. Right? And so now I get that foot shift right there. So this is a really handy tool to get your breakdowns, to get your motion refined in between your blocking. I use it. I mean, like it's nice for that, but you can use it for anything you want to, right? You can use it to duplicate a pose. You can use it to do whatever you want to, and you start getting a little bit more detail in what this motion looks like then, right? So, let me minimize all this. I'm going to go ahead and play through. Let me go ahead and I'm going to change my screen sharing to include the video because I'm going to play through my breakdowns of that time lapse for this little girl doing the flip, right? So, so the blocking pass on this is where we left off before, right? Remember this? Got that weird bad flip that happens in the middle there. This is what it looked like in stepped mode, right? And so that's one of the reasons we keep it in stepped mode, is because when we go to splined, it just got some issues with it. So let's go ahead and look at the pass that I do on my breakdowns here. This one's a little bit of a longer video, but you'll get to see. Really, I'm doing that now with the tween machine. I'm going through there and I'm breaking down my poses just to get my in-between poses and how it would transition between everything. Keep in mind, like, before we would use scripts like this, you really just, it's the same thing as you would do on paper. Is this sharing? Right. Okay, yeah. Okay, cool. I never hit share on the optimized part, so hopefully this is more clear. Right. So again, I'm just using the breakdown tools to go in there and refine the areas in between each of these poses to make sure that I'm the one who's in control of how those transition. So my wife just put the dog back up. I'll bring her back out here in a second. So again, like what I'm doing here is sort of figuring out all my steps in between, right? Figuring out how she's going to take each step, figuring out, like, here's where she pushes off and like gets sort of that little skid in there down on the toe, really pushing that pose a little bit. And there's nothing that says, like, I may be going back and like even refining previous blocking poses in this process, right? Really, it's all still just trying to make sure that I'm getting all of the necessary info in there to show a good, or to show the motion clearly. you put Sadie up?
Did you want to?
Yeah, I will here in a minute. It's all right. I will in a minute. Okay, so you can see here again. I'm thinking about stuff like the weight shifts of the character, how she goes up this tree, and again, all of these are me just breaking this down into smaller and smaller increments. So these gaps that you see here between the keyframes, right? Like this gap here, it's really me just saying that's too much information for Maya to figure out by itself, right? I have to put another keyframe in there in order to clarify what this motion is, right? And I'm still pulling from my reference here. I'm still finding little things about the poses that I find intriguing in the reference, things that I think will be appealing. And I'm thinking about silhouette, line of action, contrapposto in every one of them. Right? Okay. So again, like, this is hard for some people to like. There's not a perfect answer in like where you put the breakdowns, or I think the question I get more often is like, how many breakdowns do I need? There's not really like a predefined answer for that, right? You put in as many as you need to make that motion clear. And I think it also depends a reasonable amount on how you work as an animator. What is your preference, right? Do you, maybe you are going to put fewer breakdowns on the arm and then go back in once you get to the splining pass and just do a little bit of manual keying on the arms during that process. And maybe you want to work more in the graph editor on the motion itself, on the root motion itself, on the hips and the spine, and then do more in the graph editor, or do more posing later on the arms, or do that when you're working on the arcs. Like, there's all sorts of different reasons that you would put different amounts of breakdowns. When you'll hear people talk about it, sometimes they'll say they key it on like fives, or they something like that. And what they're trying to say there is like they maybe don't do it every 5 keyframes exactly, but they're trying to say that they don't let a larger amount of time than a certain number of keyframes go by before they make a decision, right? And right here we got this big jump from 56 to 65. That's 9 frames. Like whatever's happening there, I probably want to make sure that I've broken that down just a little bit more, unless the character's totally just standing there and not really changing much at all, right? And again, everybody is different. I usually have a keyframe somewhere between every 5 to 7 frames by the time it's over with. Again, unless it's like a big an area that's like got a lot of stillness to it, like the character's kind of holding that pose. If that's the case, or if it's a slower acting piece, it may be like there may be gaps of like even 10 to 12 frames that I don't have keyframes for, that I'm just letting Maya fix that, and then Maya interpolate that, and then I will fix that once I get into the graph editor. Kind of see progress. So we'll do a little bit of math here in just a second. My weakness. This is not a fast step, right? But to me, it's still part of the fun part. It's still where I'm getting to break down this motion and be creative on the way things happen there. So you see, I'm offsetting the legs as part of my breakdown to where one is hitting the ground earlier than the other. I'm adding some drag to the spine, even some stretch to the neck, right? All of these are things that I get to control and make creative decisions about, and it's really like, this is the fun artistic part to me, is to get to figure some of this stuff out. A lot of times I will still have this in stepped mode while I'm working though, right? Just I want to make sure that that I'm still just concentrating on pose as much as I can. Okay, let's see. We're getting close to the end here. Yeah, and then this is me like kind of giving her a little breathing motion right there on the end to kind of keep her alive, right? So at this point in the process, I before I even started my breakdown poses, I was probably a good 5 or 6 hours into this, right? Like I had been working for a long time on this. If I go in here and hit play, you'll see that I'm ending working on this. I'm probably about 10:33 a.m. I started it at 9:30 a.m. So just using that tween machine, I probably spent about an hour just doing breakdowns on this shot. From what was an already pretty solid blocking, I would say that that's actually pretty efficient. That was actually pretty quick on my part. Usually I would think it would take more than that. Like it would take a couple of hours. So I tell you that to remind you how much time goes into this, right? And I know that that's time is a commodity right now for everybody. So just make sure you're dedicating time outside of class. I know the beginning of the semester is always crazy, but as you'll remember, the middle and the end gets crazy too. So make sure we're kind of carving out some chunks of time in your schedule to be able to put that into it, right? There's not really a way to fast forward through this process and do a quick, easy version of it, right? The quick, easy version is just the not good version. So make sure you're spending some time focusing on all these poses and all these breakdowns. I promise that it's time well invested, because if you've blocked this and you've broken it down really well, when you go into splining is actually really pretty easy. It's not always super fast, but you already have your plan. Like all of your plan is there, and everything in splining will just work out, right? It's just polishing it. Like you've already got all the big chunks off of it. Now you just got to smooth it, right? If you haven't done that, it's going to take a lot of work in the graph editor to make it look good, even if you possibly can, right? You can't edit the curves enough to improve bad blocking. It's just going to make it smoother blocking. Right? Okay. Other any questions for me right now on the breakdown pass? Any of this stuff we've gone over today, or other questions just in general? It is not snowing. It appears to have stopped. Do y'all want to make? Can we let Sadie out, or will she just go like ape shit?
Yes, but it defeats the purpose of teaching her to be in there.
Okay, you're right.
Well, let her. You want me to let her in?
I don't know. Y'all want to meet Sadie? She may freak out a little bit, but sorry.
What?
I said ape shit. It was like language. Nah, leave her in there. She needs to learn to stay in the room. So she's cute. Take my word for it. You'll see her again. You'll see her again.
She'll come back.
She goes nuts though when we let her out of the room, and then she just starts running everywhere and like knocking stuff over. And we're like, come on, settle down. Anyway. All right. Any other questions? Anything y'all want to chat about? Going once. Okay. As it is, let me share my screen on that. I think mine is set up to already do that, so that's why. So, Play Blast. So you can get QuickTime files, which is an MOV, and then set that to the H.264. And that's not an MP4 file, but an MOV file with the H.264 codec is still essentially the same thing. In fact, I'm pretty confident you can just rename it to an MP4 and it will play fine. I'm not saying do that, but that's the way that I always do it. But a lot of you probably aren't getting QT as an option. The reason you're not getting QT as an option is because you may not have those installed. So if you do, it's just this QuickTime installer here. You can choose when installing it. Let me show y'all really quick. Save. So you can choose when you're installing it. Hit open, preparing installer. You go to modify, I guess it is, and you can say do not install the player and just install like the features and the essentials and stuff. And do you sure want to cancel it? If you do that, what it will do is it'll install the codecs but not the player. Does that make sense? And then it should, if you restart Maya after that, it should let you play Blast Out as the H.264 with MOV. Yeah, there's also some third party, like basically a lot of people use those codecs, and then Apple was like, sorry, we think there's a security flaw, we're just going to throw it away. And a lot of people were like, no, we still need those. So they wrote like some third party, or I guess they basically just like re-released those codecs under like a different package. So there's another way you can get those. Let's see, it's QuickTime codecs. Yeah, like if you actually just search QuickTime codecs, there's a couple of other codecs that people have released as well, that are kind of like the alternatives to them, right? That will still play Blast Out as the same thing. If you're just doing it on your computer and you play Blast Out as an AVI uncompressed and it plays okay, you're probably all right. But most of the codecs that are under AVI here are just not good. Like they're just not going to give you anything. Like it's just going to look terrible. So hopefully this is something Maya will fix soon. Like I wish they would just put an MP4 format in here. But you know, we'll see. So, did that answer the question, Brad? Cool. Other questions? Going once. Twice. All right. Well, I guess that pretty much wraps it up. If y'all want to head out for the rest of the day, go for it. I think I'm gonna grab me a quick lunch before my next class, and thank y'all for bearing with me. I would say always try to remember to check your email before coming to this class, just in case something like this happens again. And it just seemed like it made so much more sense to be doing this remotely today. So, all right, I'll see y'all. Have a good night. Oh. Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. So do you want me to disable the recording? Can we chat about that? Or does it matter?